My reef tank was once my perfect little ocean in a box. 15 gallons of carefully placed rocks, coral, and my 2 clownfish. A miniature world that was just so different from all my other tanks. Then I moved, and suddenly what had been a living work of art never returned to its peak. The rocks didn't fit together like they used to, the coral ended up wherever it landed, and if I'm being honest, I neglected it a little bit working on other projects. It wasn't ugly. The fish were healthy, the coral were surviving, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. I had every intention just to do a simple rescape of the tank, but the day I told myself I would go to the store and get some new rocks, I saw a Facebook ad that I couldn't pass up. A full Red Sea Reefer 170 setup. Tank, stand, sump, skimmer, wave maker, lights, and a bunch of other extra stuff. Everything all included. For the price, I couldn't believe it. This would more than double the total volume of my current tank. After reaching out and connecting with the seller, Seth, we loaded everything up, chatted for about an hour, and by early afternoon, the tank was in my living room. That night, I didn't touch anything. I just researched the plumbing, the sump, the skimmer. I watched videos, read instructions, and planned everything out in my head. The next morning, it was time to get things in motion. First, the sump. Now, I'll admit, I was a bit nervous. A sump had always seemed so complicated, but it turns out it's basically just a larger canister filter with no lid. I also realized that I put it in the wrong way initially. After a slight rotation, all I had to do was connect each of the 2 outputs from under the tank to their respective pipes that flowed into the sump. Then, just put the return hose onto the input tube that feeds back into the aquarium and connect the return pump. Next came the light and the wave maker. Both were easy to mount, and the best part was, because they were both Red Sea products, they could be controlled from an app on my phone. The Red Sea Reef Beat app. With a bit of troubleshooting, I got everything connected and fully controllable in the palm of my hand. That's when I realized I forgot to level the stand. Trust and believe, I'm fully aware of Red Sea's reputation for catastrophic seam failures. I vowed to do everything in my power not to become another Reddit post. The seams looked essentially perfect upon inspection, but off came the tank anyway. Using a longer level will ensure greater accuracy. I leveled in every direction to be redundantly cautious. Using some shims for careful adjustment, it finally sat square. Time for a fill. Water's flowing, and then a drip. Not from the tank itself, but from a hose that had been bent too much in storage, causing a tiny hole. I cut the tube just before the kink and continued to fill the tank. I waited with anticipation as water flowed over the weir into the sump. That's when I spotted a few drops of water coming out of the input tube. I immediately drained the tank to figure out the problem. By the time that finished, water was also pooling up in the cabinet under the sump. There was no way to tell if that was from the leak in the input tube or a separate leak in the sump, so the sump needed to be tested in isolation. Now, the previous owner did mention some damage to the corner of the sump, but said he thoroughly water tested everything for over a week to make sure it held water. It did not. Out came the trusty blade to tear apart the sump and reseal it. Getting the outer edges off was pretty easy as usual, but the inner baffles made it really hard to get the blade in the proper place. In the process, I ended up breaking off one of the corners. I got everything cleaned up and prepped for the reseal. This time, I'm trying out black ASI silicone, just to match the aesthetics of the main tank. I made sure that the broken corner was at the top where no water would reach it. Since it doesn't hold a lot of water, there shouldn't be much pressure on that pane. But to be clear, I wouldn't recommend this to other people. As a precaution, the outer cube of the sump was tested by itself to make sure that no water would ever leak out into the stand. After a successful test of the main area, I needed to add the baffles back in, but realized that I placed a couple of them too close to the wall so the skimmer wouldn't be able to fit. Once everything was dry, I ripped them out and replaced them. It's not the prettiest, but I don't really care because it would be inside the cabinet out of sight. One last test to make sure water flowed properly through the system. I watched as it flowed, filling up one section and moving to the next. It sat full for a few days and was put back into the stand. Once hooked up, water could now flow freely throughout the entire system. Everything worked perfectly, but it was loud. With a couple adjustments to the flow, I got it whisper quiet. One of the other things that came with the package deal was a good bit of rock. Some standard white and some purple. I went with the purple here, hoping it would mimic coralline algae that never seemed to grow in my old tank. Then I started stacking. Trial, error, trial again. And of course, nothing fit how I liked. But luckily, on a PetSmart run, I found a rock on sale that would bring it all together. Perfect. Well, not quite. Trouble arose when I realized I didn't account for the overflow box and the front of the rock didn't fit. No matter what I tried, it wasn't working. One of the offshoots of the main arch was the culprit. It made the whole structure stick out, so it was done away with. I put it back in only to realize I removed the wrong offshoot. So back outside to try again. After a bit of configuring, things fit perfectly. There are little caves for fish to swim through and hide in, and it still looks rather natural. With the addition of some live sand, things are really looking marine-like. I searched everywhere for the water clarifying packet that came in the bag, but it was nowhere to be found. Maybe they forgot to put it in? Maybe it will turn up later. Maybe it just lives in there forever. Either way, the tank was filled. I threw a bunch of filter floss into the filter cup to polish the water and gather all the loose sand particles that were floating around. Now it was time for the auto top-off system. I placed the level sensor in the return chamber of the pump, and the leak sensor in the cabinet near the rear corner of the sump. The system did come with a reservoir for fresh water, but I wasn't sure how to plug the hole when I wasn't using the included float valve. So I just decided to use a cereal container that had a greater water capacity anyway. With the pump inside, I filled it up and we were almost ready to go. It too was connected to the Reef app for monitoring. After 2 days, the tank was mostly clear, so it was time to start the transfer. Moving the media over would give me an instantly cycled tank, so I grabbed the media from the old tank and threw it all in the new filter cup, followed by some new polyfill. Then slid it into its place in the sump. My clownfish watched nervously as I grabbed the first hammer coral out of their home and moved it into the new tank. They had no idea what was going on. Green tip octospawn was next. And one more hammer. This will go up a little higher. Now for my personal favorite, the green torch. And this gold frog spawn that never really bounced back after the move. Hopefully it will do better here. With the LPS coral done, soft corals were a bit trickier. The easy one was this little toadstool leather on its own rock. I can just wedge the rock wherever I want it. The Sinularia leathers were a bit more difficult because they attach to the main rock, which will not be going into the new tank. I had to carefully peel them off the rock, and when there was nothing left to peel, they were cut. A couple small pieces were able to wedge into the hole in the rocks, but the larger ones needed something to anchor onto. Rubber bands held each to their own rock, and they were placed in a low flow corner, hoping they would attach in a couple weeks. Since the media from the old tank was used, we can add our critters right away. First, the cleanup crew, conch snail, and the last lone surviving Astrea snail. The old tank looked like a barren wasteland without all the colorful coral. The clowns were used to having all kinds of protection around them, but now there was nothing but a couple rocks. I netted them and moved them over to their new house that was more than double the size of their old tank. They were understandably scared at first, staying tucked in the shadows of the rock caves. While they got accustomed to their new digs, I moved some of the old rock into the sump to further populate the bacteria in the system. But slowly, curiosity took over. They explored, tested new currents, and saw familiar coral in different places. I noticed they stayed together a lot more than normal in the early days. With my new orange filter that cancels out some of the blue light, the tank looks much more accurate on camera. After a few days, all the corals are looking good, fully open with nice fluffy polyps. And of course, the clownfish are loving it. And while there's still a lot to do, more coral, maybe a few new fish, this reef finally feels alive again. Bigger, brighter, and full of possibility. And maybe that's the point of every tank we build. To create, to evolve, and to marvel at the little worlds we can make in our homes.